You know, Five Nights at Freddy's is not the first, and it certainly won't be the last time that fans and critics are at odds on a movie's rating. But in my opinion, it does fail at one important key filmmaking element, and I definitely think this explains why critics are not loving this movie. Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. So I actually had no intention in reviewing Five Nights at Freddy's. I wasn't even sure if I really wanted to see it. I definitely saw the cutouts of this every time I went to the movie theater this summer, and I didn't have anybody to go see it with me in the theaters. To my surprise, it released on Peacock streaming service the same time that it was in theaters, which is amazing. It's also amazing that this movie has broken box office expectations, not even just for this movie, but for the fact that it was released on streaming services at the exact same time. I definitely think this speaks to how excited, for lack of a better word, the fan base of this movie really was. Five Nights at Freddy's is based on a video game, and I've never played it, but I have seen images of it, you know, just scrolling on YouTube. I am aware of it. I also have seen that my kids have watched edits of it, not the actual gameplay, but like little snippets, and have gone to bed terrified of Freddy Fazbear, to the point that they made me get rid of their huge teddy bear that they had as babies. So thanks Five Nights at Freddy's for that. It was a great opportunity to watch it. One of my students is actually a fan of the franchise, and so we decided to watch it in our film class. There have been a ton of video game to film and television cinema adaptations that have come out this year. We had The Last of Us, which I adored, which was on HBO, or formerly HBO, also known as Max, but I'm still gonna call it HBO. Sorry to that man. And we had another Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which I have been enjoying the franchise and liked the Sonic storyline better than even the first movie, but too much human stuff going on. And of course, the movie that just really crashed the box office this year, which was Mario Brothers movie. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, if you'd like to see my review of that one, I'll post it somewhere in one of the corners over here. Five Nights at Freddy's, I really didn't have much intent to see it, but I like Josh Hutcherson. I certainly liked him as Peter Millark in the Hunger Games saga, and so I was like, sure, why not? The film is directed by Emma Tammy, I think is her name, but the script was written by the actual game developer, and I think that is also a key component as to probably some of the issues with the film. Quick summary of the movie, but it is about a security guard ends up getting a job temporarily at a old-time Chuck E. Cheese-esque birthday party center for kids, and has to survive when he finds out that the animatronic creatures come to life and kill people. I also watched Willy's Wonderland, which certainly does not predate the video game at all, but I watched that with Nicolas Cage earlier this year. It's streaming on Tubi and was surprisingly enjoyable in a bad sort of way, and definitely a like B movie type of way. And the movie starts out, the setup of the movie, the premise of the movie, where we get his backstory, is fully engaging. I was leaning all in. I really enjoyed the opening segment where we get a flashback to him working in a mall. Made me miss my mall youth. It felt very like 90s homage to the mall scene a little bit in the beginning, and then we find out that he's having a really tough time in life. His parents are gone, his brother is gone, and he's taking care of his young sister, and he needs a job ASAP. And so when Matthew Lillard's character offers him, who is like a career counselor type guy, offers him this temporary position at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, he has no choice but to say yes, because if he doesn't get a job pronto, he's not only going to lose his home, but he could lose his baby sister, Abby. And therein sets the premise up for this movie. Going into the movie, all of that storyline, all of that backstory felt very mature, or at least very YA young adult, something that I could completely understand. But it wasn't too overdone. I felt like if my kids were watching this movie, they could understand and they could get it. But when they start with the kills, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is a bit scarier than like back in the day when we were watching Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark, and certainly much more than most of the Halloween-esque horror movies that I let my kids watch around this time of the year. So that begins the question of like, who is this movie for? My student, who is a fan of the series, of video games, was chiming in and giving me the backstory as we were watching it, and I don't remember any of that they were telling me, but they were quite engaged with the lore of this story. My biggest issue with the movie is when it tries to develop that world building to help us understand how these creatures are coming to life, what is happening, it somewhat falls apart. They do a good job of explaining some things, but some issues with regards to animatronic creatures themselves, it doesn't really make sense. And as you go through the whole entire movie, you're still asking questions. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers for this, but the creatures are actually like, they've come to life somehow. Tonally, the movie feels like it struggles with who its audience is. Is the audience those initial preteen teenagers who are now adults who want to enjoy the lore, or are they young kids? If so, there's a lot of time where it gets bogged down in very heavy dialogue and heavier concepts that I think younger kids might not be able to follow, and it kind of stalls in pacing. But then at other times, it feels too childish and it feels like it's not being mature enough. There are some of the kills that feel very dark. There's literally a kill in which it's just the shadow of the kill, and yet the concept of how this person dies is horrifying, and I can imagine that several kids watching this would go to bed with some bad nightmares. But then some of the kills, and then halfway through the movie, it just kind of becomes very fluffy, and it's very questionable as to why. Ultimately, I feel like the main character, who is supposed to be our final guy for this movie, does not spend enough time with these creatures trying to kill him. And that's such a weird thing to say, but it really feels as though it's just the last like 20 minutes of the movie where his life isn't in any jeopardy at all, and that in and of itself kind of makes it not as scary as it could be. And so I really just ended up watching the movie, and while there were parts that I enjoyed, and I wouldn't say it was a complete awful experience, it wasn't, I just did not know what this movie's purpose was. And I think that's the part of filmmaking where it fails. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't know who its audience is. It hasn't made a decision or made its mind up yet. It feels as though they wanted to put this movie together. They wanted to almost do a test run, and based on how well the movie does and who's watching the movie, maybe they'll make a decision about how dark or how light it will be. Given that, I don't really know. It just really felt like, I don't know who this movie is for. Now, as someone who had no idea whatsoever, hand to God, it was very easy to guess everything that was happening in terms of like who was doing what and who was involved in it. So none of that was actually a shock. And I also feel like another issue with the creator being involved with the screenwriting is it's a good chance that some of the lore that my student was very upset was changed and altered for the movie, was changed for the purpose of trying to keep audiences guessing, but it was like they didn't follow through with the changes. So it was like some elements were changed, some were the same, and they couldn't make their minds up. I almost kind of think that perhaps this movie, if it could have either been a prequel set in the world of the games, but maybe if they were going to try to change things to make it different, maybe it should have been a continuation of the games and create its own lore. I don't know. It just felt like it was trying to be a couple of different things. It felt like the same types of problems that happened with Pretty Little Liars when Marlene King decided to change some of the villains in the original books. It really made the story kind of fall apart because the premises that were set up earlier were geared and designed for other villains that didn't end up revealing in the show. and it kind of feels like the same thing. In terms of, I'm not going to let my kids watch this because I don't want that headache of them screaming in the middle of the night, because there were some scenes in this that were scary. But I would say that if you have a kid who plays video games and they've already been playing FNAF, then sure, let them watch the movie. If you have a preteen, they could probably handle it. There's maybe a couple of bad words in it, and most of the kills are done kind of off screen or just kind of shadowy and alluded to, not direct. So in that regard, it wasn't a true slasher film. It wasn't like really super scary. But in terms of a rating, I don't know. I would give it like a C+. Because I do think that Josh Hutcherson did a very competent job as the lead of this movie. I didn't necessarily like the actress who was playing the lead actress, the child actress who was playing his sister Abby. She did a good job. She was cute as a button. And Matthew Lillard is Matthew Lillard. We love him. We stand Scream over here, so he will always be our horror movie, you know, prince. And he was enjoyable. I actually wish we had gotten more of him in the movie. But if you've had a chance to see Five Nights at Freddy's, let me know in the comments what you thought about the movie, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Until then, toodles!